Hello and welcome to the Peter Purves podcast. Thanks for listening. You know, we had such a superb response from so many of you from my interview with Sue Cook. That's why I'm picking up where I left off last time. Plenty of new anecdotes and what Sue describes as her most difficult interview ever with Tom Baker. And wasn't there something about Alan Partridge? Right, Sue, I'm not going to start up directly where we left off, but we did a little tease for the opening podcast that we'd done. Of course, we mentioned Alan Partridge and then didn't talk about it. I'm sorry about that. I do want to talk about that. We'll talk about it a little bit later. I want to take you further back to the start of your journalistic career, because that all happened at Capital Radio, and your initial job gave you no inkling of where it was going to lead. So I'd like you to tell me a little bit about how that was. And you did become a very good journalist.
Yes, I was the last thing I expected to do. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be a sort of Catherine Whitehorn columnist. How egocentric can you get? I just thought, I just love to write. Writing was my favourite thing. It was the only thing I was good at school. But I was incredibly shy as a child. So, anybody would have put money on me never becoming a broadcaster, or the sort of I suppose fame, I should say, that I eventually got. It's the last thing, and I still never quite really believe it, to be honest. But so I'd worked at the Reader's Digest, wanting to get as close as I could to journalism, and I got fired from that because
just throw that in, yes. You weren't very good, is that it?
I wasn't a good. They said you'll never make a good researcher. But because the research for the Reader's Digest was the most tedious job you could possibly imagine in the whole world, I'd have to research check other people's articles. And so every single sentence involved about 7 phone calls. And you had to produce a research report, which was about 10 times as long as the article in the original place. So for you get a sentence like, the red-breasted robin sat on the tree, and that would be half an hour's work making phone calls saying, do robins have red breasts, or are they russet? Or are they brown? And are they breasts or are they chests? Right, thank you very much. I'll just write all that down and make a note of who said what. And do you spell Robin R-O-B-I-N by the? And do they sit on trees, or do they perch on trees, or do they not go in trees at all? So, you can imagine how in about half an hour, one simple sentence is, and if anybody disagreed with anything in the sentence, you'd have to knock it out. So you'd end up with a sentence that said, the bird was in the tree.
Yeah, keep it simple.
It was so reductive. Anyway, I didn't thrive there, and I got the sack, and I sat in have coffee bars reading newspapers looking for adverts for other journalistic jobs or anything I might be able to get. And I saw an article that said that commercial radio was coming over to the UK. I thought that was really exciting, because I'd loved listening to the Pirates under my pillow at night. It was LBC and Capital. And I thought, well, I'll apply to both, but I'll apply to Capital first because I love pop music. And so I took my curriculum vitae over to Capital Radio, stepped over the rubble of this building in Piccadilly where they were at the time. The programmes controller came down to interview me, decided that he could give me a job as a researcher, cutting up newspapers, making up the files, setting up the newsroom, because Capital in those days had a newsroom. They ended up with a whole load of journalists in there, 20 journalists altogether.
And what was this prior to Capital actually starting?
Yes, so this was 6 months before they went on air.
Wow.
I was the 7th person they took on.
Yeah.
Before even any of the DJs.
Yes.
Dickie Attenborough was the chairman, and Richard Attenborough, and a lovely guy called Michael Butt, who was also the crafty cook, Michael Barry. He was
yes, I came across Michael Barry. I worked with him on a couple of things. I can't think what they were now, but yes, nice man.
Lovely man, yes. I mean, I owe him a lot. I owe him my career, really.
Yes. So he came up with this idea of, at the time, I mean, inflation was rampant in the 70s and 80s, and you got a sort of job of finding out what the best deal was that people could get on every single day, because prices were fluctuating up and down. What's it called? Super Savers.
Yes, Super Savers.
Particular spot you had, yes.
consumerism as a thing was being born right there because the prices were so volatile. And Michael Buck had the idea of starting up this super savers idea in the Michael Aspel show. It was my job to try and find out what was coming off the boats in the fish market, what was coming off the lorries in the fruit and vegetable market, and go to the meat market and find what was good there. So I actually had to go at 5 o'clock in the morning to all these markets to start with and make contacts and meet people and see what was happening, which was, of course, I couldn't have carried on. I'm not that stupid to keep doing that every day. So I made some good contacts and phoned them up from my bedroom in the morning before I went on air and got into Capital and gave the information out that way. So, I'd be able to say there's great offers on cod is really cheap this week because there've been loads of, or conversely, there's very little cod coming off the boats this week. So I would go for haddock or coley or whatever it was. And the same with the vegetables and the fruit. I had made a lovely contact called Sam Coster at the Covent Garden, as it was then, fruit and vegetables.
It was a wonderful place, wasn't it?
Yes,
back
it
then?
really was.
Really extraordinary.
And huge. I mean, just acres and acres of fruit and vegetables and things coming off lorries. And Sam Costa used to talk about your exotics. He'd say your exotics are coming in because people, we hadn't heard of avocados really then, but your avocados were, becoming a thing. And kiwi fruit and even bananas to some extent. But
it is extraordinary, isn't it? It's not only technology that has advanced so much from that period, from the 70s, but also the availability of things. Nowadays, you wouldn't think twice about, oh, I want an avocado. You know where you can get it. Everywhere has some.
Yes, smashed
back then, in fact, I think I hadn't eaten one till about 1970.
No, I mean, we didn't. Things have changed so much. We didn't go out to dinner, did we? And food was very conservative. British, cooking and eating was very conservative. Herbs and things were hardly used. Herbs and spices and things. Everything was. My mother used to spice up her stews with Marmite, but so things have changed hugely.
That learning. I mean, and you did have to learn on the job. You had to learn how to use a tape recorder. You had to learn how to edit, which, I mean, is now so simple. Editing anything is just so easy. Technology has advanced so much. It was a very physical operation, going out, recording something, editing it and getting it ready to put on air.
I love the whole process of editing. It's very important actually to get the right feel and to represent the person and the story that you're telling. And you've got a limited amount of time, so to edit it correctly, to get all that information, as much information as possible in as short a time as possible, is a real art. I taught actually to record interviews because I was ambitious and I wanted to be a broadcast journalist once I realized how lovely it was. So you were tape recorders, they record in those days, quite big heavy things you wore on your shoulder, and you pressed the record button over your shoulder and carried the mic. And I went out and just did random interviews with people in the street, and then took them back to I managed to borrow a ferrograph, which was a big tape recorder that you could edit on. And so I edited all my sort of stammers and stutters out and made my questions sound good, and managed to teach myself how to make little features, which then Capital Radio used, not knowing how much of my mistakes I'd had to edit out.
You talk about editing it out. You literally have to cut tape.
Yes, I suppose people don't
stick it together.
No, yes. You had an editing block and you lined the two pieces of tape up, and they had a razor blade, and you'd cut the bit out. You'd mark it with a chinograph, a crayon, the bits you needed to cut out. You'd kind of do the DJ thing of whoop, 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 get the moment to cut it with a razor blade, join it up with some special splicing tape, and it would sound like nothing had happened.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And I think it's great to have done it. I mean, I did a little of it. I was never very good at it. I was never very quick at it. That was the problem. It took time, and I wasn't very good at it. And I'm very clumsy. I've always been clumsy with my hands. When we did Blue Peter, we used to have to make things all over the place. And I rarely did it because I was so bad at it. Even with the preparation, where all the stages are there, and you're doing very little. But I was clumsy with my hands, not very good at all. which brings me to something actually.
I was going to say, I wonder if it reminds me of my audition for We're Going Places.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to ask you. I wasn't part of the audition process. I was booked to do the job, and they said we're going to get you a partner to front the show as well. And the auditions happened. Tell me about yours.
Well, I had to go up to Manchester to the studio to do it. It was all very exciting, and I had to prepare a little speech about what kids could one thing kids could do in the summer. So I did something about going to a butterfly farm, and then a few other things I had to do. I had to interview somebody, I think, and then I had to show people how to make a kite because they were doing a feature about kite flying. So I was given, the producers told us in advance, here's your table. You've got two bits of wood. You've got a diamond shaped piece of plastic. You've got a hole puncher. You've got some glue. And now you make your kite. And they roughly showed us how to do it. So it came to my turn. And I think there were about 8 of us doing this audition. We had to do it one by one. So it was my turn. And I picked up this plastic sheets and so first of all you take your piece of, this is going to be your kite, so this is your nice piece of colorful plastic, and what you do is you make a hole in each corner. So I picked up the hole punch and put the corner into the hole punch and pressed, and I realized I've got a half moon shape, so I smiled at the camera and did it again. Got another half moon shape, smiled at the camera and had another go, finally got it right. Okay. And then you do the other side, and I did another half moon shape. I thought, I can't go through it. I'll pretend I've done it right. So I carried on, and then I said, you pick up your string. This is several feet of string. It's very important. I picked up the string and it instantly fell into a whole load of knots. So I'm kind of looking at the camera going, trying to untangle these knots. Yeah, and anyway, so you get they're pretty awkward, aren't they, sometimes when they go into knots? But anyway, what you do is, so I managed to finally get the knots off. And then you stick the pieces of wood across on the diamond on the kite. So I managed to do that, I think, just about. And then I said, then you pick up your string and you put it into the hole you should have punched in the corner, but haven't quite. Anyway, I said, that's roughly how you do it. And I hope you're happy kite flying. See you. Bye-bye. And I thought, well, and goodbye to me too. They'll never give me the job now. And they did for some extraordinary reason. I can only imagine it's because I just giggled my way through it and I wasn't apparently phased.
Yeah. Is it the only person I ever knew who was anyway involved with getting that job is you. I didn't know there was anybody else. David Brown just came and said, we're getting soup cook. And I knew you from some radio work that I had heard you on. I probably heard you on Capital several times as well. But I was, oh, lovely. First of all, a lovely looking girl is going to come up and do the show with me. And we had a very good time on that. It was a very simple show, nice ideas for kids to do on a day out. And I'd forgotten, and you said in our first bit of chat, that it was the summer replacement for Blue Peach. That had never occurred to me, actually.
Yeah, yes, it was. So we had a good ready-made audience there, I think,
Yes.
didn't we? And you, of course, were associated with Blue Peter anyway. So it's for them, it was a continuity.
Yeah. Going back to where we were talking about your journalistic learning on the job, you were literally headhunted, I guess, by the BBC. They asked you to come. And you told me a very nice story about the fact that you, doing the work that you were doing, and earned you enough money to have odd little bits. So you got yourself an answering machine for your telephone. And one of the first messages on it was to go to the BBC and do an interview.
Yes, so I was amazed. There was all sorts of new technology coming through, and then I got on an answering machine, went in to do you and yours for the day, came back, there's little number 1 blinking on the, oh, somebody's actually left me a message. And I listened to it, and it was the deputy editor of Nationwide asking me to come in and interview with a view to perhaps being one of their film reporters. So I did, and they gave me the job, which was really exciting. I didn't really want to leave radio at the time because I loved radio so much. So I asked at first if I could do a week on Nationwide and then a week back on radio. And they all accepted that. They agreed to that for a while, but it was not possible to do justice to both jobs by doing both. So in the end, television was the better career move, really. But I always regretted having to say goodbye to you and yours. I really enjoyed that program working for Radio 4.
What was the radio work that you've been doing before? Was that you and yours?
It was mainly you and yours. I did a phone in on Radio 1 as well on Tuesday nights with Ed Stewart.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And we had some great interview with Kevin.
You worked with some great people, haven't you? I mean,
did,
let's face it, apart from me, of course. You worked
Apart
with
from
some
you, of
wonderful
course.
people, yeah.
Yes, no, I had some.
Everyone has a low point.
No, I had some great co-presenters over the years, but also some great interviewees. Like that Radio 1 program was great. We had Kevin Keegan was one of our first guests. It was we billed as the first £1 million footballer, and the sad news came this week that he's died.
Yes.
So I was thinking about that program and how lovely.
He was a lovely man. I interviewed him a couple of times. It was a delight.
Curly hair. And I also, on that program interview, we had Michael Palin on for an hour. And we got to talking about trains and railways and how much we both loved railways and steam trains when we were young. So we were waxing lyrical about steam trains. And when we came off the air at 9 o'clock, their phone in the studio rang, and it was the head of features, BBC Two television features. He said, "I've just been listening to your program. Could you put Michael Palin on?" So I gave Michael Palin the phone, and he said, "Michael, I've just been hearing you talk about steam trains. I'm about to start a program called Great Railway Journeys. Would you like to present it?" And Michael said, "Well, yeah, I'd love to." And hence, I always think I've kind of helped launch Mike Palin's career.
Wow, yes. And what a wonderful career he's had as well.
Absolutely. I'm jealous.
It's interesting. I never knew you were interested in trains. I mean, I love them. When I was very young, our hotel in Blackpool, the back of it, literally 100 yards away, but it was all open, was the railway line. And you used to see the trains leaving from Blackpool to go to Preston and down to London. And I used to love those steam trains. Absolutely fabulous. I still see that. I see many postings on Facebook and what have you these days, of fabulous locomotives restored. And they all look far better than they ever did when we saw them. They were always very black and
grimy,
mucky and smoky and grimy. But they look so wonderful when they go on these heritage runs.
Yes, beautiful. Yes, we used to go to Wales to stay with my Welsh relatives. My father was Welsh. So we'd just go and stay with all our relatives in Wales from Paddington. We'd pack our suitcases, get to Paddington Station and get on the Great Western Railway it was an 8-hour journey from Paddington to Pembroke Dock.
Yes.
And so we'd have to have packed lunch and all sorts of things with us. And I would collect engine names on the way because we went through Swindon and all these. So we'd see lots of steam engines on the way. And I had a book where I collected all the engine names.
Those books, they were quite famous actually. With Ian Allen, wasn't he? And they had buses as well, and they had various means of transport as well as all the listings of the various locomotives, not only their numbers, but if they were namers. Wow, they had a nameplate, and they were all listed.
I didn't know
all
that.
The way through.
I didn't know.
Oh, really? No.
I just wrote them down myself and had my
wow,
book.
Yeah. I think the Train Spotter's Guide and Bus Collector's Guide and so on, all those sorts of things. Let's go back to that business that we were talking about you getting the job on Nationwide, because I'm fascinated to know what it was like, the atmosphere of working in such a major news program. I know it sort of ran out of steam, which was a great shame, but it was an incredibly important program. What was it like once you got it? Well, tell me about getting in there for the first time.
Well, it was important. Yes, it was. Everybody watched it. because there were only sort of two main channels really.
Yep.
So at 6 o'clock, everybody watched nationwide. So you had a huge sense of responsibility, and the atmosphere. You could cut the atmosphere in the office with a knife, really, because it was everything. Everybody had a mission. Everybody was doing something. People were rushing around the whole time. People weren't sort of sitting quietly at computer screens in those days. They were rushing between one desk and another, briefing people, taking phone calls, and there were typewriters clattering away. We really had typewriters in those days, and
Of course.
scripts had to be typed on these special 7-page. There were carbons, but they were sort of in one unit, so there were 7 pages. So you'd type it on the carbon, and then you'd be able to give copies of your typing, one to the editor, one to the head of department, one to the researcher, one to yourself, and one to the script, the woman who was doing the teleprompter. So you had to do your scripts in septuplet, and you had to be a good typist because you couldn't keep making mistakes. I mean, there were times when things got stressful. I remember a couple of times having a little weep in the loo, but on the other, mostly it was really good fun. And you always met up for a drink after the program. It was live, so things went wrong very often, or things went right, but you'd go for a drink in the bar afterwards with everybody, and everybody knew how to play hard and work hard as well. I think things aren't as good as that anymore, And in the bar, you could give people program ideas or contacts, or it was just a vibrant, life, really.
And very good journalists across the board.
Yes.
And some big names there at the time.
Yes, all sorts of big names. Phil, oh gosh, I mean, there's John Stapleton, of course, who sadly died recently. Thank Boff on the desk, and Hugh Scully, and Sue Lawley, of course. It was when Sue Lawley was having her second child that I got the job of taking her place, which was very lucky, because there weren't many women around who could do live, who were known for doing live programming. So.
Yes. And that's the thing, it was live at a time where it was very difficult. It was very difficult to do live stuff where you were linking to different parts of the country. This was new technology. I mean, it was amazing. We'd just been watching the World Cup and seeing pictures, wonderful pictures from all over North America and Mexico and Canada. Fantastic, absolutely. At that time, to be able to have a link between London and Newcastle upon Tyne and Glasgow and Edinburgh, and it was an amazing bit of technology. It was. Wow, isn't that fantastic?
And of course, the important thing was that you had to be able to have an earpiece, because you had to be able to hear all these different regions and hear what was coming up next. So as well as talking to your interviewee and talking to camera, you had to be listening to what was going on in other regions and up in the gallery as well. So it's amazing how the brain does learn quite quickly to separate all these things out and yet take them all in.
When you took over from Sue Lawley, did you start making more reports? Did you go out and do more? Were you more studio based at that time?
No, it was less. Before I took over from Sue Lawley, I went out doing lots of film reports. I'd be doing 3 or 4 films a week, and often starting at very early in the morning. And I'd often come back from one film, and the answering machine would be blinking, and they'd be saying, "Can you be at Leatherhead at 6:30 tomorrow at this address, or to do a film about such and such?" So it was quite but I enjoyed doing it. I loved it, particularly if I got the chance to do some research beforehand. I did a film about death and dying. The producer thought it was a good idea, and it was. A woman was doing evening classes to get people to talk about death and understand about death and what was involved and what bereavement and what wills and the whole thing. So I went to Somerset. I went to Yeovil. I don't know why I chose Yeovil, but I met some undertakers and watched them work, and realised what a vocation it really was, making a body look nice. And grieving relatives, they would say, grieving relatives would come in and in tears, and they'd see how lovely their relative made the relative look, and it would give them a lot of comfort, and they'd come out comforted. And I could see what the vocation was. I went backstage at a crematorium as well and saw how that all worked.
Wow.
And it sounds a bit macabre, but we need to face these things. And there's one I just met some extraordinary people. I've never forgotten it, really. I've always had a thing about death and how we remember people and memorials. And, I think it's fascinating.
And that is interesting because you have recently been doing a whole series of television commercials about funeral planning.
Yes, I have done
Yes,
that. Yes, I'm not doing
yeah.
that now, but that was interesting. Again, meeting people who have real vocation. It really matters to them to make people's experience as good as possible. It was good.
When you first went to the BBC, um, it was a pretty straight-laced sort of place, I think.
Um, yes, because I went straight from Capital to BBC Radio 4. And so I carried this kind of joy of broadcasting over from Capital, a sense that everybody was on the same side. You weren't talking at people, you were talking to people. Michael Buck had always said, you're talking to one person. Never say all of you or thank you for all your letters. And I always, even people say it now, and I always say to the radio, all my letters. I haven't sent you one letter, let alone all my. But so I had this ethos about talking to one person, and what mattered to me and still does when I'm broadcasting is none of all the material and the claptrap and the hardware and the people and things in between. What matters is you and the person on the other end, that one person you're talking to. So I've always carried that with me, really. And so when I went to Radio 4, I was very lucky. That was another audition I did, actually. There's one of the presenters, Mavis Nicholson, had been presenting one of the You and Yours programs. There was a different presenter each day, and she was leaving. So they auditioned people, and for some reason, I was only 24 or 25, I think, and I got the job of presenting You and Yours, which, was stunningly wonderful. But I remember after in one program, I said to somebody, "Oh, c'est la vie," I said. And when I came off air, I was told you must never say "c'est la vie." People won't understand. That's a bit too upmarket. People won't understand what you mean. Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. Never overestimate your audience. Do you remember any really memorable interviews at that time?
Yes, you were saying once I get stopped filming, then I was studio based. So then I'd be interviewing people within the studio, and had some wonderful interviewees. I had um, Lou Adler, and yes, I think I interviewed Queen twice, actually. Once very early on, and they were absolutely charming and lovely to me. So I was really quite new at interviewing when I first interviewed them. But they were sitting on some kind of podium that had been set up in the studio, and they would just smiled at me and were lovely and forthcoming and great. And then I did another one in the studio for a weekend slot. I did rather like We're Going Places, telling people what they could do at the weekend. And I had the whole band in there. And I think I'm right in saying I'm the only person who's ever interviewed the whole band together in one room.
Yes, right up your street, things like that. But you have told me a story in the past, which I think is worth you repeating, really, is when with the band, you were also booking things at university for different events, and you booked Pink Floyd, which sounds fantastic. Didn't quite work out.
Yes, yeah, I was on the entertainments committee at university, and yeah, one of the bands we booked one evening was Pink Floyd, all very exciting. Um, but the rugby club, for some reason, at Leicester University, the rugby club were really subversive and didn't like any of us hairy lefties at all. So when Pink Floyd came on, and a rugby club got backstage and kept unplugging their amps, which really peed them off no end. And in the end,
As it would.
yes, as it would. So in the end, they stormed off the stage, stormed back into their buses, hit several cars in the car park on the way out, and disappeared off in a puff of smoke. Very embarrassing.
More embarrassing for the golf club rather than for them. I bet they didn't care. We're off. I know you loved interviewing, but what was the most difficult interview you ever did?
Most of them were amazing, but I suppose one of the most difficult ones springs to mind is the Tom Baker, when he'd left Doctor Who. And so the idea was to interview him to find out how his view, looking back at his time on Doctor Who and what he was going to do next. I'd just come back from the States, so I was a bit jet lagged, and I arrived sort of a little bit jet lagged. Live interview. I crossed the studio floor from where I'd been from one. The studio was divided into different sections, so I walked across the studio floor to where Tom Baker was standing by the TARDIS, which we managed to get into the studio. He was leaning against it, looking rather sort of roue, and he just didn't really want to talk about it. I don't know why he'd agreed to come in, really, but I imagine, bless him, he hadn't wanted to leave, I don't think. And he didn't. So any question I asked, he would say, "Well, I don't know. What do you think? I don't know." I think it's still online somewhere. You can get it online. So I just kept smiling, kept asking the next question, but he was just looking so thoroughly fed up with life, and didn't want to say what he might be doing next. And looking back on it, I think he was just feeling fairly depressed and hopeless. But
Yes.
you know,
I mean, his legacy is that he's a lot of people's favorite doctor by a long way. And a whole different load of generations really have watched him. And of course, he's still doing it. He's still going off to conventions and all the rest.
yeah,
And yeah.
it's
And I worked with him very slightly last year and the previous year, doing a tour of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. I was the narrator for it, playing Charles Dickens, and he was Marley's ghost.
all right.
And it was a stage tour, and he was on film. And an insert as a ghostly figure appeared on the wall of.
Oh, so you didn't actually meet him again?
No, I didn't meet him. I've met Tom several times. Yeah, yeah.
You were in Doctor Who yourself, weren't you?
I was, yeah. I did a year in it way back. It's probably at the moment now, together with Blue Peter, my biggest claim to fame, and I do enjoy it. And of course, we've just had the lucky discovery of 2 episodes of that I was in way back 60 years ago, and they'd never been seen since because they were never sold.
Yeah.
And they just appeared in a collection of someone who died, a film collector. And it's gone down very well with the Doctor Who fans, who are rather thrilled with all that. So can we move on to one of the biggest shows that you did? I know it was one night a year, but you did it for a good long time. And it was a sensational show. It was a wonderful idea that the BBC had come up with, and that was Children in Need. How did that come about? And tell me about some of the moments from it, because you must have had a very interesting time with it.
It was amazing, yes, and quite terrifying as a prospect, because it was 8 hours ahead of you, live television. You didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know whether I'd be able to keep speaking, whether I'd seize up. I think I got it because, once again, Crime Watch was in the same department. It was producing these complicated live shows, because Crime Watch was complicated as well, with lots of things coming in and out. So there's been Nationwide, and there was Crime Watch. So I was known as somebody who could deal with complicated things, with sources coming from all sorts of areas, lots of things going on in your ear, and yet still carry on looking fairly calm and collected. So I suppose that's why I got the job with Terry Wogan, and I did it every year for 13 years, and it was a huge privilege to do it, because you knew at the end of each show that you really made a difference to people's lives. People were so generous and gave so much money, and there was so much talent. People were prepared to give their talents and their time, and it was just everybody. I think just about everybody in the BBC up and down the UK was involved in some way. Everybody sort of contributing something. So to be the front of such an amazing phenomenon was a huge privilege and very exciting.
Did it always run exactly to plan, or whether?
Well, plan
all
is.
right, that's obviously a silly question. Go on.
You use the word plan. The script used to be quite thick, but you'd open it and it was just said, most pages just said TBC or TBA, to be arranged, to be. So we didn't. People used to come off their shows in the West End, and all sorts of famous actors would just literally wander in. They'd get a cab to Television Centre and literally wander onto the stage. Sometimes we knew who they were. Terry was more clued up on personalities than I was. I was more of a current affairs person, but he would recognise more of the famous people than I would. But you'd have to busk the interview saying, so what are you doing at the moment? And how's it going? And what are you going to be doing next? And get away with not knowing who on earth you were talking to. But and there were all sorts of things went down. Microphones didn't work. I remember the opening of one show with Joe Lumley and me and Terry. Joe was our third presenter, and she was. We introduced her, and we couldn't hear a word she was saying. The mic didn't work, so we went on to somewhere else, and that didn't work either. So we said, oh well, never mind, forget that. Let's go to there. Let's go to Manchester with it, and that didn't work either. Somebody was popping balloons, but you couldn't hear anything. So it was all you could do is laugh. But I think it was capital training just taught me to have fun with broadcasting and not take it too seriously and not think the world's coming to an end just because something's gone wrong.
Yeah, that's what a lovely attitude. I mean, mine has been very similar in that I just love performing. It's just great fun. I've loved that since I was 9 years old, and I never wanted to do anything else. And I feel very lucky that I was able to do it. I mean, we're very privileged, really, to have had all that. And of course, you get noticed by all sorts of people, which brings me to our mutual friend. I don't know if he's a friend or not. I've never met him. Alan Partridge, Steve Coogan. We're both the butt of very good jokes. How was it with you? Did it affect your life in any way?
Well, it's a bit of a pain in the neck, to be honest, at times. Because people are always saying, "Oh, Sue Cook's pulled out," So people think that I'm the sort of person who pulls out of things. If they don't understand the reference, they wonder why. They keep seeing things about me pulling out of things. But I don't know. It's quite fun, really, as well. I know I get used to it, really. But yeah. It's the kids thought I was dead cool. I wasn't expecting it. We were sitting at home on the sofa watching Alan Partridge, and to our amazement, suddenly he started talking about me. The kids thought, "Oh, mum," because I didn't really tell the kids much about my job. I didn't think it was, I didn't bring my job home much really when they were young, and so they didn't really know that I was a thing or well known at all. So when I came up in Alan Partridge, they decided I was cool.
Yes, I think the same thing really happened with me. It's a very good, funny gag. I mean, I can't remember. I don't know why he picks on Crewe railway station for me to be where he met me and I get on the train, because I don't think I've ever got off at Crewe. Though I was at college near there one time in Alsager in Stoke-on-Trent. But I get the same thing, which just gives the same joke every time. Don't be blue, Peter. Oh, all right, thank you. The interesting thing is that a lot of people who put quotes on Facebook and all the rest of it, I post something on Facebook, and I get some very nice replies. I don't know whether they're filtering out all the bad ones for me, but I mean, I get very nice comments generally. But there are some where what the heck's that? And it turns out in almost every case, it's another Alan Partridgeism. Not about me necessarily, but it's another one of his lines. And in fact, the Sue Cook's pulled out one was just one. I couldn't resist using it when I decided how to put out the first podcast.
And my mother was really shocked because there was another one where he said, "Take the fag out of your mouth, Sue." My mother said, "You get up smoking."
Well, it would have been true in the 70s. You used to smoke in the 70s.
I did. Oh yes.
Yeah, we all did, of course.
Yeah. Ashtrays were brimming with fag ends.
Sue, it's been absolutely fabulous talking to you, and I think it's quite remarkable actually that our careers and paths have never crossed again since that wonderful time back in the late 70s and early 80s.
I was really jealous of you doing crafts. I thought I'd love to work with you on crafts.
Crafts was fabulous. Again, it was one of those jobs. It was only 4 days a year that I did it, but there were plenty of spin-offs. I did a lot of dog shows and various things around the country concerned with dogs. And of course, I keep dogs. I'm very happy doing so. And my wife, in fact, has her mother used to breed Pekingese, so she's always had at least one Pekingese. We've got one at the moment, and a couple of Dachshunds as well. We
Oh, have you? Because I've got a Dachshund too, a wire-haired one.
Oh,
Called
well, of course. I mean, what else? Wire-haired Dachshunds, the most disobedient, stubborn, annoyingly irritating little beast that ever walked.
No,
I love them to bits. I adore them. But it's the size of a shrinkage for me because we did keep Newfoundlands for a while, and they were magnificent. Sue, lovely to talk to you. Thanks ever so much for being my guest. Maybe we can do it again in the future when we've got other interesting things to talk about, but you're a fascinating guest, and it's been lovely having you on the show. Thanks ever so much.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you. Great. Speak again.
I hope you've enjoyed that conversation, and for my Patreons, there's a bonus with some extra pieces with Sue that I didn't have time to include. Please remember to like or comment, and if you can, subscribe to join my ever-growing Patreon group. Till the next time, from my co-producer Mikey Smith and me, adieu.